Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and we are really getting into the battle of Gideon with his 300 men. But first, we want to see, how is Gideon going to go about this? What is he going to do with 300 men against an army that is not just one country, but multiple? And so, what is he going to do? What does the Lord have in store for Gideon and the 300 men? So, if you want to turn with me, Judges chapter 7, we're going to start in verse 15. So, Judges chapter 7, verse 15 is where we're going to start. All right. So, Verse 15. As soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. And he went back to the camp of Israel and said, Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets into the hands of all of them and empty jars with torches inside the jars. So we'll get into the trumpets and the torches and the jars here in a second. Gideon will explain it, but first, so the dream that is being referenced here in verse 15 is the dream that he heard from Midianites themselves, about how they, even with all their supposed might in their camp, were going to be defeated by Gideon and the people of Israel. And so he takes that, does not question it. Once he hears it, goes back to the camp and says, "Look, here's what I heard. Here's what's going to happen. Let's do it." And so he divides. And by the way, this is interesting in verse 16. He doesn't just keep the 300 men together. No, he divides them into 3 companies. So there's 100 men in each company. And you would think, as a strategist, that he would maybe try to keep them together so then they can they can be all together. But by spreading them out, it actually works in favor for the plan that the Lord has for Gideon and for the 300 men, which Gideon will now dive into when it comes to those empty jars, torches, and that are inside the jars, and then the trumpets as well. So, verse 17, and Gideon said to them, Look at me and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. Great leadership, right? Right there for sure. Verse 18, when I blow the trumpet, and I and all who are with me, the 300, then blow the trumpets also on every side of all the camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. And this would be done by each group of 100. So let's say, for instance, the camp, which I think might get into a little bit, but let's say, for instance, there's a valley in the camp, and that's where they are at. And so you have a little bit of a hill up top, and what would be interesting is that it's almost kind of like a horseshoe, where you would have 100 here, 100 here, and then 100 here in this area. That's kind of what I'm thinking, to be honest, is kind of what this might look like. And again, you don't have very many men, but if you have them spread out in that way, and then especially if you're blowing trumpets, that is going to make it seem like there's more than 300, especially if they're spread out and they're making that noise. That's going to help. And so I think that's part of the strategy here, which is brilliant, but at the same time, nobody would have thought of this if the Lord didn't orchestrate this. I think that's the point. Yes, it's a brilliant idea, but it's not something that Gideon would have come up with on his own if it wasn't for the Lord. He would have probably thought, okay, maybe 2 150s, but probably just have all the 300 come together. That's probably what maybe was on his mind, but the Lord has something totally different in mind, and it is a brilliant strategy. So let's see that play out here in the rest of chapter 7. So chapter 7, verse 19. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Again, just massive amount of noise all of a sudden. Then the three companies, again, 100, 100, 100, blew blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled. So, if you could just paint this scene, just think of it like you are in the valley, just sleeping away. That's what the middle watch, the watches were only for the evening mainly. And so you're it's in the evening, overnight, and then all of a sudden you just hear these crashes, and then you hear this just high pitched music, and then all of a sudden you hear shouting too, and then lights come on. Now, granted, it's not like a headlight, and it's not like a stadium light, but it's still light that comes on that you're not expecting. And so, no wonder they all ran. Now, obviously, there is a divine implement to this as well. The Lord is causing chaos within the army. And so, we'll continue to look at that here. Verse 22, when the Israelites blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. That's the Midianites there, with the other countries as part of this big army. And so that's where the divine implement comes in, right? So it's not just the 300 soldiers. It's not just Gideon, but the Lord ultimately is behind all of this. And he sets every man's sword against his comrade, against all the army. What does that mean? What does that phrase mean? Set every man's sword against his comrade. Honestly, it means that they're just swinging wildly at this point. They think that there are thousands of Israelites coming down upon them, and they are just in a panic. Their souls are just completely anxious, and so some of them, maybe not every single one, um, but no, I'm sorry. It does say it says every single one. So maybe not right away does every single one start swinging, but eventually every single soldier in this grand army that the Midianites have orchestrated starts swinging against each other in a mad dash of doubts and of fear. And that just opens up the opportunity for the Israelites. And the army fled as far as Beth-Shittah toward Zerera, as far as the border of Abel Mahola by Tabath. And the men of Israel were called out from the tribe of Naphtali, and from the tribe of Asher, and from all the tribe of Manasseh, and they went after the country of Midian. So this is now turned in from 300 to three whole tribes, or some of the people in Naphtali, some of the people from Asher, and then all of Manasseh. And so this has gone from 300 to all of this. But it started with the 300 men, but ultimately starts with the Lord, right? So verse 24, Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of the tribe of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them as far as Bet-barah, and also the Jordan River." So also the men of Ephraim were called out, and they captured the waters as far as Bet-barah and also the Jordan River. So now we have the 300 men, Gideon, some of the tribe of Naphtali, some of the tribe of Asher, the whole tribe of Manasseh, and now the whole tribe of Ephraim are out there as well. This is just kind of snowballed into this massive rally cry, and for the Midianites has just become a nightmare. It really has. They thought that they were just going to go in and sweep the Israelites off their feet, but instead it has just turned an absolute nightmare. And not only that, but they're about to lose some leadership as well. Verse 25, and they captured the two princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, right? And Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb. Again, here's the thing that I find really, really interesting. Well, I'll finish verse 25 here. Then they pursued the country of Midian. They brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan River. So, verse 25, I find this interesting. So, Oreb and Zeb, we don't know a ton about them. Just obviously that they're in leadership and they're part of the enemy of Israel. Is it possible that Reb and Zeb are the ones that orchestrated this attack? Very possibly, yes. You can't say definitively, but yes, it's very possible that they did. And so this is very much justice for the Lord against not just the Midianites, but against these two leaders of Midian that very much could have put this strategy against Israel into plan. The thing that I find interesting is where each were killed. And you have a rock and a wine press. Well, for me, that's incredibly interesting as a reader of scripture because you go back to Judges chapter 6, if you want to turn back there for a second. You go back to Judges chapter 6, and where's the first place that we see Gideon? It's in a wine press. Now, granted, he's trying to harvest wheat in a wine press in fear, but now they're killing an enemy of the Lord in a wine press. Yes, it's not Gideon that's killing them because the heads of Oreb and Zeb are later brought to him, but it's pretty crazy that he is found by the Lord in a wine press, and yet he brings justice. The Lord brings justice to Gideon's enemies, literally by killing one at a wine press. The other one is killed at a rock. Well, where is the fleece put on in the sign of the fleece that the Lord will be there to protect and to guide Gideon? It's put on a rock. And I think that is incredibly interesting. Obviously, is that a direct correlation? Maybe, but I also don't think that it's just a coincidence either. I think he is trying to say that he will be with Gideon no matter what the circumstance. And the cool thing is he's saying that to you and I as well. No matter the circumstance, whether it's an army or whether it is financial troubles or anything like that, the Lord is with us, but he's also there to bring justice as well. And sometimes that justice can be in the form of disciplining us as children if we have wronged him, if we have disobeyed him. And so I think that's something to really remember here with the passage of Gideon. Now, we aren't quite done. We're going to go next week into Judges chapter 8, and that is more about the post-war of Gideon, this post-battle. There's still more fighting to do, but there's also some leadership there as well, where Gideon starts to make some interesting choices, some good, some a little bit confusing and not so great. So we're going to look at that because Judges chapter 8 is usually never looked at. It's just kind of, you think about the 300 men, the battle there, but you never really think about Judges chapter 8 and what Gideon does after the battle for the rest of his judgeship. And so we'll look at that next week. However, I'll see you with Brahmin Word tomorrow as well. Thanks.